Let me tell you a story about hyperinflation in Romania. This was probably about 1991, maybe 1990. And this is for the dreamers, for those of you who think, we get to our best when we're hungry and we want to share, and everybody just want to kumbaya. And it doesn't always play out like that. And as much as we try to help the less fortunate from whatever we had, like clothes or something like that, it doesn't always play out the way you want it to play out. And here's an example, and I have such a vivid memory of this. So we were a family of 8 people, most of them grown-ups, and I was a young person back then, right? So this was one of those winter days, early mornings in the winter, the special winter when we would butcher the pig, right? When we would slaughter the pig. And the way this happened was that this happened in the city, right? In the city, in front of the entrance of the main apartment building where we lived, right? There was this concrete, piece of basically deck sort of stuff, but it wasn't really like that. It was just a piece of concrete, wide enough, spacey enough, where everyone just went there and took their turn and slaughtered the pig. And the pig was usually brought in by car. We didn't have trucks after communism, and very few people had trucks. They were lucky if they had one, right? And they were probably well connected to have one. But so in the old Dacia 1300, so DACIA was the car, 1300 model, and we pulled out the back seat of the car, and the pig was live transported with that car to the city from wherever we purchased it. And we had to put money together. That's why it was 8 people, and the money was pulled together for that one pig to be slaughtered, and that was our meat supply for most of the year, especially until maybe April or so. After that we had chickens and that sort of stuff, but that was the meat supply from actually sometimes it lasted more because we really had to consume everything. Anyway, so the pig was brought in. I was a young person. I was there to help, usually to hold usually they made you hold the bucket for the blood to come out. And there we were. It was a very happy day because we know that we're gonna be eating meat that day, right? And the processing was beginning, right? So after we burned the skin, scraped off this burnt skin, and not the skin, burned the hair and scraped off the skin to get the burnt hair off and everything, and it was being butchered right there, basically into larger pieces. Then the pieces would be brought up into the salt buckets or whatever, and then we would process it. Anyway, so this gang of youth showed up, and actually it was only 2 people. 2 people who showed up, and they were young, and you could tell them that they were poor, very poor. And they politely asked for the intestines, for the small intestines of the pig. I remember very specifically they asked for some pieces of the small intestine. Now that usually would go that you would just give a piece as is. They would bring it somewhere near some water, and they would clean it out. I don't know if they made soup or they just ate it like that. Those people ate, unfortunately, sometimes raw stuff from garbage, right? So they weren't like asking a lot, but it was really just the beginning of something else. And there was a trick in here. And I remember vividly the quote that one of my uncles said, "Well, what do you want us to put the sausage into PVC pipes?" And that was kind of his joking way, like, we can share something else or some other stuff, but like, we can't just give you the whole thing, right? Because we need to clean it, we need to put sausage away, we need to, like, there's a whole process, right, to make the sausage, to smoke the sausage, preserve the sausage. It was like, this was just the beginning. We can't, and this was our pig for the year, right, for the until next year December. So it's not like we can give stuff away. We usually did, but that was like a more regulated process. Like as we consumed it, as we had more of this, or we didn't consume something, then that would be put away to like, but it was not a good idea to, as you're processing it, to just give away. And that was the joke. So the quote was that, well, what do you want to put us the sausage into PVC pipes? And as a young child, I found it's so funny. And then my other uncle was saying, well, we're not going to give you anything right now because we need to finish this. And it was a bad idea, because as soon as you would give them something, and you can be your own judge, but basically more would show up, right? This was kind of a system where one or two, the smallest, would come and ask for something. As soon as you give, more would show up, and then more and more, and eventually it would be just overwhelming. So that was the case, right? And these weren't neighbors, these weren't people we knew, they might have not even been from the same city. They were just probably going city by city that's what their lifestyle was, or putting camp up at the edge of the city. And sometimes they stayed there for like years and years. Anyway, so that was it, but they kind of started getting cocky, and like after that joke was shot or something like that, and it was just no longer a friendly environment. But they were young, right? These were young teens or teenish people, and after not too long, like maybe 5 more minutes, sure enough, more showed up, probably older ones. And at that point it became more serious, because the sound was more threatening, in the sense of like, give us something or we're not going to go away. And they had rocks with them, right? So like, it's kind of crazy, because so my father was there, my cousin was there, who was much older, my uncle was there, my other uncle was there, and they all had knives, and they were processing, there were blood everywhere. So they were in the suit, and had knives, and it was like crazy that people, especially young people, would have no fear, and they were just hungry. You could tell them they were hungry, but it was more than that. It was just like more beginning to be malicious at that point, right? And at that point it almost got to a confrontation, right? And more and more showed up. Eventually, I don't want to say like huge numbers, but we had probably 4 adults, males, and myself, right? And the women in the family, who were just bringing stuff and processing and washing stuff. And they were probably about maybe 8, 10 ish, and from younger to older, right? And there was a gang. They really wanted that meat, and at that point we couldn't give anything, because it was just you had to stand your ground, because if not, this could go very ugly, right? And luckily, and they were prepared to probably not necessarily like life and death situation, but definitely attack us. And our luck was, of course, well, this was in front of our own building where we lived, and we knew everyone there, right? So suddenly, as soon as this kind of like started happening, more and more neighbors showed up, right? And immediately, as they kind of like stand in a half circle, probably around or near the pig, it was becoming overwhelming for them as well. And they knew that they may be 8 or 10, and by that point our numbers were probably also 8 or 10, and we were more prepared to defend it. And this feels surreal, and you can have like a judgment, like, okay, why didn't you just like give them a piece of meat or something? But it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. That's what they told me. Like my father actually would have was non-confrontational. He would have been just probably okay with sharing some. However, my uncles weren't, because they have went through and they have seen this situation play out multiple times in their own near their own place, which was closer to the edge of town, and it was just never happy. It was never happy ending. And they knew like this is the earlier you stop this and the earlier you show force, the better. And that was it. So eventually they just scattered off. However, that kind of left an imprint in me, like, why couldn't we share? Like, well, as a young person, this was actually like an interesting, happy memory for me. Like, oh, so this is the things like this happen, right? And it was interesting to me, and nobody got hurt, luckily. So I never file it as a bad experience. It was an interesting experience for me. And anyway, so what I wanted to say is that things like this did happen, right? I'm not always like, these are not like the memories that I share constantly, but they are there, right? And you can draw your own judgment, but like, if they would have been much more prepared, and this could have gone so many different ways, that I think this was probably the best outcome. Now, of course, you know, about sharing, we consumed that pig to the last bone, in the sense we made meat jelly, we made sausage, we made soup. There was probably nothing other than the teeth, and I'm serious, the teeth that were probably thrown away, because even from the face of the pig you would make face cheese, or whatever it's called in English. So it was never thrown away. Even the fat was rendered, and the unusable fat or uneatable fat was made into soap, and that was our soap for the year, right? With some ashes, and my grandma cooked the fat and turned it into soap. So it wasn't like, okay, here you go, here's a pound of meat, and we'll just grab something else next week, right? So these were situations where you, with modern eyes looking back, seems crazy, but that was normal, right? And we did trade some of the meat, and we did give away, but it was more in a more controlled fashion, where there were places where you could drop off something, and then people who were humble and people who were non-confrontational would be able to go there and in organized fashion take some of that. And like early on we couldn't contribute to that, but later on we did, and even early on with some clothes, for especially kids and that sort of stuff, I know my mother contributed, but it was a different experience, where it was more controlled. And eventually, especially the Dutch, for some reason in our town, the Dutch, who the humanitarians came in and helped people, especially with baby food, baby formula, baby clothes, and they were more like in a religious you know, context. But it was quite interesting to see. So those of you who kind of like have these idealistic views on how things play out and how you can all just share and sing kumbaya, it's a bit different. Even back then it was different, and you know, it's up to your imagination and my imagination how things would play out with the morals that we have today in our society. So I hope you learned something from that. I know I did for sure. So let me know about if you learned something from this in the comment section below. By the way, also, these videos are no longer monetized. I specifically turned off monetization, so just so you don't have to watch stupid ads and promote garbage that they want to sell you. If you want to support this channel, please feel free to do so in the links below. And you know, more stories to come, hopefully. All right, talk to you next time.